Welcome, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Practical SQL Server HAD. I'm trying not to. I'm trying. I am trying as hard as I can not to sound like a radio DJ. I remember back in, I think it was 2005 or 2006 timeframe, I was at a Microsoft office in Singapore, and we were doing these Microsoft sponsored workshops, and they gave me a session slot. But while I was waiting for this, for my slot, I was fixing the audio. I was working on my presentation, my laptop, and all of that. And I do have a little bit of a background in sound engineering, but I was just having fun, and I was making announcements like, if you're looking for the restroom, what did we call it back in Singapore? I can't remember. Loo, toilets. If you're looking for the toilets, they're on the left side. If you're looking for the pantry, they're on your. And somebody asked me from the audience. He asked, "Hey, were you a DJ before?" I'm like, I sure pretended to be one, but that was every once in a while I kind of have fun if I'm doing a presentation and I'm doing audio checks. Instead of the usual check mic 1 2 3, it's boring. But that's me. Anyway, my own personal experiences, um, people who have attended my training programs on how to make SQL Server high availability and disaster recovery practical. The fact is, high availability and disaster recovery is already expensive. It's complicated, it's complex, it's also confusing. And the last thing you want is to be um, inundated. I don't even know why that word came to mind, but you'd be overwhelmed with so many things that may contribute to making your high availability solutions problem it uh, in with practice um, uh, uh, support the challenges. And I kind of sum it up. And again, the goal of these episodes is to share with practical, actionable items, right? It doesn't make any sense for you to learn a lot of things, but you don't even take action on any of them, right? I was reading a book, interestingly, because I got into uh, reading physical books back. It's weird. Typically, I would either listen on audiobooks uh, or PDF, ebook from Kindle. But I kind of miss flipping through the pages, and I realized, wow, I really do miss reading hard paper books, right? So I was reading this book, The Power of Habit by, let me see, who was the author? The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, where he focuses on the habits of us human beings and how they come about, how if they're, you consider them bad habits, how you can eliminate them, or if you consider them good habits, how you can further enhance them to your own benefit. And there was one chapter in there where he talked about uh, a healthcare facility in Rhode Island in the United States. Interestingly, in the early 2000s, they were very, very well known for medical malpractice. Yes, I mean, come to think about it, there was even a story about a surgeon who was supposed to operate on the left side of the brain, carved a hole on the skull on the left side of the brain, not realizing it was supposed to be on the right side of the brain. I don't want to be that patient. It, and you don't just perform surgery on the skull or on the brain unless it really is critical. So just the time it took for that surgeon to do the left side plus the right side took a lot of time, plus the fact that, again, they were basically treating the patient as if, yeah, it's just a machine. No, it's a human being. And that got me thinking as well when it comes to medical malpractice. Because for one, there is a term, like I said, medical malpractice in the medical field or in the healthcare industry when a medical professional does not perform the appropriate um, either diagnostic or appropriate test in order for the physician, the doctor, the surgeon to provide the appropriate solution or the appropriate um, medication if need be. The thing is, I kind of looked at that in terms of how we as technical professionals are also in the same boat. We don't call it medical because we're not in the medical field. I kind of consider it a technical malpractice. And what do I mean by that? If you've been to any um, uh, forums, news groups, if you hung out on any online sites like Stack Exchange or Microsoft Forums, I think now they call it Microsoft Answers. When somebody posts a question about a problem, let's say, for instance, couple of years ago, I had somebody reached out and not reach out, but post a question on a forum that said, "Hey, we are having some issues with our analytics system, and we want to offload our reporting from the analytics system so that it doesn't take longer to run the queries and then provide analytics." One guy who was frequenting the forum immediately just said log shipping. Okay? And this was back before, even before the days of always on availability groups. But notice that somebody immediately jumped into providing a solution based on a specific scenario. I have my analytics system. We're running reports off of it, but then it's slowing down because there's more people coming in. Uh, we want to offload the reporting from that so we can provide better experience. And somebody just jumped log shipping. It's a natural tendency for us technical professionals because, for one, that's how we've been conditioned, right? Whether you've gone through computer science, you had a degree, whether you've gone through engineering or any type of training or exposure or education when it comes to computer related stuff, is when somebody poses a problem or asks a question, the immediate response is, okay, here's the solution. And so we have been conditioned to do that ever since, right? Even at work, when somebody says, hey, we need an HA solution, always on availability groups, or um, you don't have enterprise edition license, failover clustered instances. It's instinct for us. And I don't disqualify myself from it. I don't excuse myself from this because back in the early days of my career, that was my default response. Somebody asks us a technical question, I provide a technical answer, right? But the thing about this is when you compare this to like the medical professional, medical field rather, they have a term for this called medical malpractice. In this, in my case, I kind of decide to call it technical malpractice. Now, the focus of today's conversation revolves around asking the question: is your HADR solution a byproduct of technical malpractice, right? And I want to focus on this because, for one, just like a medical professional possibly doing something that is not to the patient's advantage or not to the patient's benefit, whatever solution that you are implementing, or possibly somebody else, third party vendor, an external consultant, or somebody who's senior, former senior DBA, former senior sysadmin, implemented the solution, left the company, and then, because he's no longer working with the company, he left the care and feeding to the people who are still left in the company, right? So I want to emphasize, and I want to, what am I looking at? Okay, I want to give you some insights as to start evaluating whether or not your existing HADR solutions are a byproduct of a technical malpractice. Now, again, it is not intentional that somebody would just deploy a solution because, well, it's what we were trained to do, right? So I kind of uh, give people the benefit of the doubt because, again, they're only doing the best that they can do given the skills and exposure and education that they have, given the limited resources that they have at that time. For them, that was the best, right? But when you start to think about it, well, wait a second. The moment that you start analyzing and assessing whether or not your HADR solution is really a byproduct of a technical malpractice, you need to start working towards fixing those, alleviating potential problems in the future so that it actually does what it's supposed to do, right? Get your pen and paper ready. I've got like 3 things that you can use to evaluate whether your existing HADR solution is a byproduct of technical malpractice. The first one, right? The existing HADR solution is causing more problems than it is supposed to solve. It's causing more problems than it is supposed to solve. 2014, somebody reached out to me. They deployed an always-on availability group solution, 2-node failover cluster with a 2 replica availability groups, and their goal is high availability. That is their goal. But guess what? The AG is more offline than it is online. So more often than not, they would respond to incidents, they would respond to alerts, they would respond to outages after outages. And when something is supposed to just work, right? When something is supposed to just work based on the design, based on the implementation, you kind of ask the question, so why do we have this and why do we even have this, right? If the solution is causing more problems than it's supposed to solve, then it is a byproduct of technical malpractice. Again, the person who implemented the solution might not have the intent, but he or she was just doing the best that he can, given the circumstances, the skills, the expertise, the knowledge, the exposure to the technology, and the resources that he or she had back then. So that was their best. But if the solution is causing more problems than it's supposed to be solving, it's time to evaluate. Again, going back to that story that I mentioned earlier, somebody reached out to me. They wanted to deploy. No, not they wanted. They've already deployed an always-on availability groups, 2-node failover cluster running 2 replica availability groups. And man, on average, in a week, that thing was offline for 6 hours on average, and they've been running this for like 3 months. 3 months, right? When, again, the solution that you implemented or somebody else implemented is causing more problems that it's supposed to solve, then it's about time for you to start evaluating it. I asked a couple of questions like, what's your recovery point objective? What's your recovery time objective? What's your SLA? And lo and behold, I realized their design is inappropriate. I asked them, why did you come up with that design? And I say inappropriate because, for one, it just flat out didn't work. I mean, I would assume if it worked more than 50% of the time, because you want your HA solution to be highly available, not work 30, 40% of the time. In fact, it's supposed to work 95+% of the time. Because otherwise, what's the point of building an HA solution? What I realized was the solution was designed, or 2 replica AG with running on 2 node failover cluster was designed by a former employee, senior DBA, had ton of experience, and it was his first time designing something like that, and then he left. And then this guy who happens to be the next in line when it comes to responsibilities and seniority, he ended up taking care of it. And again, the person who designed it had the best interest in mind, possibly. I want to assume that they have the best interest in mind beyond just putting a line on their resume that said, I've done this, right? And back then, always on available groups was relatively new. It was released in 2012, so it's 2 years. If you can put something like that on your resume, hey, I'm a highly qualified candidate with this set of skills. And again, I'm assuming the best They've done the best that they can given the resources that they have with the limited experience and knowledge and skills and expertise that they have. So that's almost always what I assume. Okay. But again, it shouldn't be causing more problems than it is supposed to solve. I mean, my HA solution is supposed to solve outages or minimize outages or avoid, not avoid, you can't really avoid outage. But when my HA solution is actually offline most of the time, then what's the point, right? After that, I mentioned, look, time to reevaluate, time to redesign. After we had some conversations around what's the recovery point objective, what's the recovery time objective in SLAs, and looking at, is this really an HA solution or is it a DR solution that you thought was supposed to be for HA? Because those are different. Right? After I fleshed out what the real requirements are from the business, not from the person who's building it or not from the person who's managing it, but from the business. What does the business really need? After that, well, I said, well, no other choice, redesign. Guy wasn't happy, but that's what needed to be done. What's needed to be done, right? And again, this is the problems it is supposed to solve, time to reevaluate, right? The second thing is that the solution only solves symptoms, right? Not the root cause. Okay, the solution the solution only solves a symptom or a number of symptoms, but not the root cause. Again, going back to the what I mentioned earlier about somebody building an analytics platform, they want to offload the workload. And then somebody jumping in and say log shipping, you configure log shipping to do read only, where you have your log shipping secondary to be configured as it's not doing the constant recovery mode, but that it had an undo file so that anybody can just read from it, unless of course the log shipping restore job kicks in, which then prevents people from being able to connect to it. But because of the fact that it just solves a symptom, we immediately assume, oh, problem solved, right? And again, this is how we were trained. We provide a solution to a problem based on that definition of the problem. And this is where I start asking the what I call the 5 why questions. 5 whys. Somebody says, we want to implement this. I ask the first question, why? Well, it's what we believe we need. Why do you believe that you need to implement, let's say, a 3 replica always on availability group, 2 replica in the primary data center, and a 3rd replica in a secondary data center? Because it meets our HA and DR requirements. Well, what are your HA and DR requirements? 7-hour maintenance window outage. Well, the fact that they just mentioned anything more than 4 hours, for me, as far as I'm concerned, anything more than 4 hours does not merit a very complex availability solution, right? And typically the response that I would get is, oh, our CIO gave us a mandate to deploy something like this. Well, why did your CIO tell you that? Well, I don't know. He probably attended Microsoft Ignite back then, and somebody from the Microsoft teams did a presentation, and when they came back from the conference, they decided, hey, let's implement this, right? It may solve only a symptom or several symptoms, but not the root cause, right? What is the root cause, or what is the ultimate goal? What problem are you really trying to achieve? Is it you want to deploy an always-on available group solution, or is it you want to provide 3 nines for your database systems from a high availability point of view? Oh, and by the way, you want to provide 3 nines to your databases. What about your applications? Because as far as I'm concerned, well, it doesn't matter how quickly your availability groups fail over to the secondary replica, even if it's seconds, like less than 30 seconds. If your applications can't connect to it because they're not highly available, then there's no point. But you have to think of it way beyond just the database platform. If you're looking at high availability, you have to look at all aspects of this, right? So again, the solution only solves a symptom or a number of symptoms, but not the root cause. I remember the story from when I was hanging out with the people from the Power BI product team at Microsoft. We were on a like tour of something, and the guy who has been working for Microsoft used to work for the Excel team, and he gave me some insights as to how the Excel team way back when, the mid 90s, I think. And if you have worked with Excel for a couple of years, you've kind of seen the evolution of the product, right? At some point, people from Microsoft finance team approached the Microsoft Excel team about a feature update or a feature request. Much like how we submit feature requests for the products that we want. And the request was, "Hey, do you mind if we can have more than 256 columns for an Excel spreadsheet or worksheet in that case?" More than 256 columns. Of course, now I think it's more than what, 64,000 something. I don't remember. The finance team at Microsoft wanted more than 256 columns. Okay, they wanted more than 256 columns for the Excel spreadsheet, and so the product team, gave the user what they wanted. But as this guy from the product team was telling me the story, he kind of led me on a typical behavior that most people have is, I have a problem. This is what I think the problem was. Help me solve it, right? And that's why when the Microsoft finance team approached the Excel product team, they said, we want more than 256 columns for Excel. That's what the product team delivered. And they delivered, right? They made Excel capable of supporting more than 256 columns. The problem with that is they never bothered asking, so why do you need 256 columns? Maybe they wanted to do more. Maybe they want to achieve something, a task. But why do they want to achieve that task? Right? Is it they're consolidating data, or they want to import data from multiple sources? You know how it is when people are working with Excel, they're importing data from all data sources. It's still the ultimate data wrangling tool, regardless of what the data engineers say sometimes. But the thing is, they wanted a feature just because they want to accomplish the task without really without really asking the question, why do you want to accomplish that task in the first place, right? Because that could be the start of something that would lead them to the real problem or the root cause, rather than just simply solving the symptom or a bunch of symptoms in a problem. I was kind of thinking, as this guy from Microsoft was telling the story, I was kind of thinking maybe they could have, if the finance team described the real problem in more detail, or maybe when the Excel team asked more meaningful questions on what the finance team really wanted, they could have provided a function within Excel that could help them achieve what they really want to achieve, right? So that's the second one. The solution is only solves a symptom or a number of symptoms. So we're really good at that, right? We solve one problem, maybe it solves a bunch of other different problems, but it's not really solving the root cause, right? The third one, and this is huge, because this is something that I see. Maybe it's a pattern because people did not anticipate this. The third thing is that the solution lacks real 24/7 support. Sometimes they don't even have 24/7 support. Why is this important? Because for one, again, the minute that you put your SQL Server databases, or anything for that matter, on a high availability platform, the minute that you consider this to be a high availability solution, it has to be available 24/7. Of course, it all depends on your recovery point and recovery time objective and SLA requirements. But I've seen cases, again, where an external consultant will come in, right? A third party vendor, managed services provider would come in, build the solution, hand it off to the customer, and then, like, that's all on you. You take care of it, right? Without anticipating the fact that part of making an HA solution truly highly available is having capable people. And I emphasize this a lot, not just capable, but also available. I mean, what good are capable people if not they're not available? And I learned this the hard way because when I was working as a data center engineer, I was the senior escalation guy, and I was the senior escalation guy. Was I just me? So when I was traveling, uh, of course, on a different time zone, you kind of have to worry about: are these people awake? Am I going to be awake? Uh, I received an email from one operations guys telling me, "Hey, we needed to address this," and the good thing about that is it was 3 o'clock in the morning their time. It was my 12 noon because I was in Pacific time zone. They were in GMT plus 8, so I was able to respond to it. But what if I was not able to respond to it because I was en route to a different location? Maybe I was driving or maybe I was flying. Then there's no way for them to escalate it to anybody because I was not available, right? When you uh, uh, start implementing a high availability solution, you need real 24 by 7 support. And it's not just capable people, they have to be both capable and available. Okay. There's no point in having available people if they're not capable. I mean, I'm pretty sure you've had those experiences when you have an operations team where they get the alerts first, they get the page first, and then they were supposed to be the first line of support, but all they do is they get the email alert, forward it to you without even reading it. Sometimes they reroute the email to a different team because that's all they do. They don't even bother reading the title. And so you have to have real 24 by 7 support with people that are both capable and available. Not just capable, not just available, but both capable and available, right? So when somebody starts building an HADR solution, complex as it may seem, you know, four replica AG, 2 nodes in primary data center, 2 nodes in a secondary data center, and sometimes, a file share witness on Azure, or maybe it's a cloud witness. And if nobody knows how to deal with that, I mean, what's the point? It's not a true HADR solution if nobody can actually support it 24 by 7, right? It doesn't matter if it works on the first, second month, even third month, because there's no guarantee that it's going to be like that. It's never a question of if it happens, it's a question of when it happens. And when it does happen, you need to make sure that you have a team. Just you, and I don't consider one person a team, even though a lot of people will say, "Hey, I'm a one-man team." Well, you need to sleep, you need to eat, you need to take breaks, you need to go on vacations, you need to relax, you need to go on weekends. So if you're on weekends, who's supposed to be on call? Who's supposed to be taking care of this? 2 years ago, one guy reached out to me, and he was a one-man team, built a 3 replica availability group. He was very proud of it. The only question that I asked that made him really think about his situation was, when was the last time you took a weekend off? And it was quiet because he was actually um, in the ballpark with his daughter watching the ball game while on his phone. That's not a vacation nor a weekend off, right? And that's why during those times when he was the only person doing all of these things, he was just so tired and exhausted. And you know how it is when you're tired, when you're exhausted, when you're stressed out and you're burnt out. It doesn't really matter how good you are. It doesn't matter if you're the most senior escalation guy in your team. We're just humans. We're going to break down, and you have to consider that as part of your HADR solution, right? So these are, again, 3 things that you have to ask yourself. And I say are because maybe you have more than one HADR solution for your SQL Server database. Maybe it's a combination of availability groups with log shipping or something else, and maybe you have multiple platforms. Ask yourself the question: is your existing HADR solution a byproduct of technical malpractice? Number one, is your solution causing more problems than it is supposed to solve? right? The second one is the solution only solving a symptom or a number of solutions rather than targeting the root cause or addressing the real problem? And number three, do you have real 24 by 7 support? If not, man, it's time to reassess. It's time to reevaluate your existing solution. And if not, do something about it. It may be redesigned to really meet the business requirements. Maybe hire more people in order for it to be fully supported 24 by 7. Or maybe reassess. Maybe it's not the real solution that you need at this point, right? Those are the three things that you could start looking at in order for you to evaluate whether or not your existing HADR solution really is again, a byproduct of technical malpractice. And again, I'm just using the term because everybody does what they thought was best or what they think is best, given the limited time, limited resources, limited expertise at that point in their career when they're doing it. So I always give them the benefit of the doubt, right? That is about it for this week's episode of the Practical HADR Show. And if in your case you don't have real 24 by 7 support, maybe because you're the only person on the team, somebody else built it, designed it, deployed it, and you don't even have a clue at all what it does, how to support, how to respond to incidents, how to do break fixes, reach out. Use that link on the screen, schedule a strategy session, and let's have that talk. Let's have that conversation. We'll look at whether or not your existing HADR solution is indeed what your company needs, or if you don't have capable and available team that would support your HADR solutions 24 by 7. I'm more than happy to help in any way I can. Reach out, use the link on the screen, schedule a strategy session. This will lead you to my calendar page where you can pick and choose a time that works for you, right? Let's have that talk, and I'll help as much as I possibly can. If not, I'll steer you in the direction that will help serve you best. No matter what, it'll be a great use of your time to start leveraging how you can take what you've learned today and apply them into your existing environment, right? That is about it for this week's episode of the Practical SQL Server HADR Show. Tune in again next week for another topic. And again, it's just, for me, it's just interesting how when I see a specific challenge or specific issue, I kind of see some patterns with how it was implemented, how it's deployed, and how it's supported with the teams they have. So join me again on the next episode. And with that, thanks for joining in. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Goodbye.